Start today's show off on a somewhat somber note. I view death, the death of a believer, the death of a Christian, as not always somber. It's in many ways I'm almost envious of them because they are home. They are in the place that I long to be, that many of us long to be. But it's still there's sadness for us, those who remain, because we have to go on without them. Last night, a man whose teachings, whose preachings, whose sermons I've heard more than any other pastor out there. A man whose teachings I greatly respected, died. Voddie Baucham was a different sort of pastor, a different sort of preacher. When we often say that this preacher or that preacher is unwavering, unapologetic, that was Voddie Baucham in a nutshell. It didn't matter if he was on CNN, he would tell them that yes, whatever it is about the Bible that may offend the leftist sentiment, the leftist mentality, he was definitely very willing to speak it boldly. He was excellent at his job. And so it's funny because today's show we're going to be talking about crimes. We're going to be talking about justice, hopefully, for some. But there was a sermon that by Voddie pretty recently that I think it was my favorite. It wasn't the best one that I've ever heard. It was probably top 10, maybe top 5. It was good. It was very good. But it was fitting because it's a reminder that while we're here, we might pat ourselves on the back for stopping this injustice or that, but just a reminder that we all have our own justice, that if it were to be delivered to us, we would all be dead, because God's justice would encompass us. We don't have the right to anything, no reprieve, nothing. Our sin nature is of such to where there's truly, legitimately nothing redeemable about us. I'm not just talking about the criminals or the Hitlers or Stalins of the world. No, I'm talking about all of us. And this particular fiery speech from Voddie Baucham tells you everything you need to know. If you haven't heard him, this is a good taste of who Voddie Baucham was.
When people say, no, our problem is this, our problem is that, we say, no, our problem is that God created the world, and God created man, and he put man in the garden to keep the garden, and he gave the man a command, and he held that man to perfect, perpetual obedience to that command, and he promised him life if he kept it, and death if he didn't, and he didn't keep it. He ate. And because he ate, because of that one man, sin entered the world, and death through sin. And everyone born from that man through ordinary generation inherited that man's sin nature. And because of that sin nature, sins proceed from it. And our world is broken because of that sin. And we stand guilty before a holy and righteous God. And we know that he's holy, and we know that he's righteous, and we crave justice. But the problem is that if God gives us justice, we all die. And so that God, in his goodness and in his mercy, sent forth his son, who was not born of ordinary generation, but was born of a virgin. Yes, the virgin birth matters. Why? Because if he's born of ordinary generation, he's born in sin. But because he's not born of ordinary generation, he's not born in sin. He's clean of sin. His record is clean. And he keeps his record clean. And he obeys God's law. And because he's fully God and fully man, he obeys the law of God on our behalf in his active obedience. And then in his passive obedience, God made him who knew no sin to be sin for us. All we like sheep had gone astray. Each of us had turned to his own way, but God laid upon him the iniquity of us all. And Christ died for sin once for all, the just for the unjust. And God imputes our sinfulness to him. and he nails our sinfulness to the tree. And Christ dies and raises again on the third day for our justification. And there's another imputation. The righteousness of Christ is actually imputed to us so that God can be both just and the justifier of the one who places faith in Jesus Christ, so that all those who come to Christ may enter in, so that all those who place faith in Christ might be saved, but not only saved, but sanctified, because he's the firstborn of many brethren. We're justified and we're adopted into the family of God, and we're sanctified, and as his children we begin to bear the family resemblance, and we're further sanctified throughout this life by the very same gospel that saves us, until one day when it's all said and done, we're not just saved from the penalty of sin, we're not just saved from the power of sin, but one day we're glorified and saved from the very presence of sin. That's the gospel that we preach. That's the gospel that we need. And that's the gospel that's more than enough.
Normally I would have cut it off just as soon as the applause started. I wanted that one to linger, just so we could all get an understanding. If you're not familiar with his sermons, I wanted you to understand that the faithful that hear him, that know him, that knew him, they loved him, they adored him. This is not a denominational thing, to be clear. You know, he was very good friends, of course, with John MacArthur. They worked together quite often. I've seen tributes from people like Ken Ham. He was extraordinarily special to all of us, special to this world. And he lived his life in a way that exemplified his beliefs. And we will miss him. There's him, MacArthur, of course, Charlie Kirk, James Dobson, all dying here recently. The question is, what are we going to do? Who's going to stand up and say, here am I, take me? We need more voices, not less. We need voices to be strong, to proudly proclaim the gospel, proudly proclaim this a righteous message, one that does not bow down and say, oh, you know, we're all equal, so therefore let's have drag queen hour at church, or hey, you know, there's more than one path to salvation, and you know, God is so merciful. Surely you wouldn't just be against this. No, God is who he says he is in the Bible. And if we read the Bible, then we can get as complete of an understanding as we're capable of getting in our flawed and weak human state. Voddie Baucham demonstrated that. In many ways, so did John MacArthur and James Dobson. Charlie Kirk's role was, I think, a bit different. He wasn't there necessarily to be an apologist for the faith. He was there to just demonstrate as a layman that he could allow his faith to come out in anything that he did, in everything that he did. His was more, we'll call it a very, very young but wise church elder status. So they're going. I mean, that's a lot of very powerful Christian presences here in the United States of America and for the world that have been taken home in very recent times. I would say that we must not necessarily, quote unquote, replace them, but others must stand up. Others must come forward. Others must pick up as much as we can, follow in these gigantic footsteps of great men, and proclaim the gospel boldly, declare our faith loudly, and be unapologetic, unwavering, and always ready to answer the question, if any man asks us why we have our hope, and be able to point to the Bible, point to God, point to Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. This is the time. And hopefully, with all of these changes, what's happening in the world, people that are being taken from us, leaders of the faith, hopefully, Lord willing, some will stand up. I know that I am definitely going to do my best to try. Let's take a short break. I know it's early, but let's take a short break. And when we get back, we will talk about the aforementioned crimes that are being perpetrated, but also, based upon certain trends, it seems as if crime and punishment are coming together again as a duo instead of just the singular crime being rampant here in the United States and across the globe. So stay tuned. The insurance you need to protect your American dream. That's the tagline for my great friends over at America First Healthcare. You can find out more for yourself. You can reach them by going to patriot.tv/health, patriot.tv/health. Check them out, see what they offer, whether it's for health, for life, for business insurance. They do a fantastic job. But that's just me saying it. I would strongly encourage you to reach out to them through that link, talk to them, and see what they can do for you. Because look, we can say, oh great, it's awesome, they're America First company and blah 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 blah, they have their shared values and all that. That's great, right? It really is. But is it better? I mean, we're not going to be getting worse coverage just because we can they might give us worse coverage, but by golly, they promote America. That's that's just not going to happen. We are practical people, my audience here at Patriot TV. But with that said, they claim, and I would encourage you to research it, but they claim they actually have better coverage than what you get through the government-controlled healthcare systems or even many of the private healthcare offerings out there. And more importantly, perhaps for some of you, they offer better rates with, according to their website, with thousands of insurance plans to choose from. It can feel overwhelming to find the right plan at the right price. At America First Healthcare, we take a holistic approach to make sure we find the best coverage for your exact needs. We get you better rates by helping you choose the right type and amount of coverage. Then we shop around for the best results. They can save you up to 20% on the coverage. Who couldn't use? I know we're most of us, the vast majority of us, are paying. I mean, compared to what we used to pay, my goodness, we're paying a lot. 20% right off the top. That would be a huge benefit. So reach out to my good friends over at America First Healthcare. Go to patriot.tv/health, patriot.tv/health. Former FBI Director James Comey was indicted on Thursday, and praise God for that. We'll see how it goes. Not getting my hopes up too high, but this is at least a tangible step. It's more than, we're investigating or we're sending a harshly worded letter. No, this is something tangible, and that's a good thing. We'll see what Pam Bondi and Kash Patel are able to come up with. He did respond, and I want you to take note of something odd in his response. Watch.
My family and I have known for years that there are costs to standing up to Donald Trump, but we couldn't imagine ourselves living any other way. We will not live on our knees, and you shouldn't either. Somebody that I love dearly recently said that fear is the tool of a tyrant, and she's right. But I'm not afraid, and I hope you're not either. I hope instead you are engaged, you are paying attention, and you will vote like your beloved country depends upon it, which it does. My heart is broken for the Department of Justice. But I have great confidence in the federal judicial system, and I'm innocent. So let's have a trial and keep the faith.
Did you catch that? That really weird insertion there when he said that, mentioned voting? You got to vote as if your life depended upon it. It's like, that really caught my attention. What in the world is he talking about? It's September of 2025. Nobody's going to be voting soon other than a handful of local elections. What is he talking about? And I started thinking about it, but keep in mind that entire response was 100% crafted. His attorneys got together, maybe whatever political team got together, and they're trying to figure out what message do we want to put out there. They had him memorize it. He practiced it over and over again, and finally delivered what we saw. And it's supposed to sound like a heartfelt response, from the heart. And yet it was 100% crafted. So why would they include the concept of voting at this point? And then it's like, now I understand. He's going to lose, and they know it. They know that he's going to be convicted. They know that the evidence is overwhelming. They know that he's going to go to jail. So to get some sort of benefit out of it, not for him necessarily, but for Democrats, they had him insert that because they plan on using this video, or at least portions of this video, to portray him as a martyr who's been sacrificed on the altar of Trump, and Republicans are bad, and you got to vote for Democrats. That message was not intended for us. That message was intended for next year's electorate, which, again, to me, this seems crystal clear. They know that he is going down, and they realize there's no way he's going to be able to slither away from this one. James Comey wasn't the only big story that dropped late yesterday. As a matter of fact, this next story that came to me from John Solomon over at Just the News, this story would have been the big story of the evening, of the talk of the town all over X and everywhere else. If it wasn't for the James Comey indictment. So a little bit of thunder stolen there, but we're going to give as much of that thunder back as we can. Again, this came to me from John Solomon over at Just the News. FBI bombshell, 274 agents sent to Capitol for J6. 274. Many later complained they were political pawns, which is in many ways exactly what they were. And when I say in many ways, it wasn't just, there was more than just politics involved. I'm not suggesting that there was any positive reason for them to be there. I'm saying that part of it, yes, they were political pawns, but they were also there to do other things, and we'll learn more about that in the article itself. The FBI secretly deployed more than 250. Let's stop there. I think we all knew, everybody knew that the FBI had a presence there. If you'd ask your average, even patriot, how many, a couple dozen plus some informants or whatever. No, maybe you might say, they had like 40 or 50. 274. Are you kidding me? This was planned, obviously. You already knew that. The FBI secretly deployed more than 250 plainclothes agents to the U.S. Capitol during the January 6th event, an operation so organized it unleashed searing frustration among many of the FBI's rank and file that the Bureau had lost its core competencies to wokeness and allowed its employees to become pawns in a political war. There's no better way to put it. This according to an after-action report kept from the public for more than 4 years. Scores of FBI agents and personnel, many from the Bureau's premier Washington field office, sent anonymous complaints to the after-action team detailing how agents were sent into an unsafe scenario without proper safety equipment or the ability to identify themselves readily as armed officers to other police agencies. The most persistent complaint was that the Bureau during the James Comey and Chris Wray era had become infected with political biases and liberal ideology that treated the protesters from the summer 2020 Black Lives Matter riots far differently than those arrested in the aftermath of the January 6th episode. And here's a quote from one of the reviews from the FBI. It says, the FBI should make clear to its personnel and the public that, despite its obvious political bias, it ultimately still takes its mission and priorities seriously. It should equally and aggressively investigate criminal activity regardless of the offender's perceived race, political affiliation, or motivations, and it should equally and aggressively protect all Americans regardless of perceived race, political affiliation, or motivations. In other words, Treat the crime as a crime, treat the criminal as a criminal, don't look at anything else, which that makes sense. That is what we can not only expect, but demand when it's not the case. And we've seen the disparity. We've seen what happens to some, again, the BLM rioters versus the J6 protesters. It was night and day. They were burning down cities and killing people, and yet they were treated very, very differently, much more nicely, much more kindly. Whereas anybody who was near the building, did nothing but walk through a building, they were pursued with every possible instrument, tool, tactic, procedure. They were hunted down like dogs if they walked through a building. And yes, that makes me very mad. And it should make you all mad. That agent, who the whistleblower who sent this after-action report, said, urged the FBI leaders to identify viable exit options for FBI personnel who no longer feel it is legally or morally acceptable to support a federal law enforcement and intelligence agency motivated by political bias. One agent suggested the problem extended beyond the Bureau to D.C. U.S. Attorney's Office, indicating a more widespread problem with political bias. In other words, it's not just the FBI, it's the DOJ, or at least it was. Now, Lord willing, we know that Kash Patel is doing what he's supposed to do to try to clean up the FBI. We hear that Pam Bondi is doing what she can do to clean up the Justice Department. We will see. Another agent wrote, currently the U.S. Attorney's Office is dictating what it is that gets investigated. This is a dangerous precedent because we can barely get them to prosecute investigations that clearly meet thresholds needed for federal prosecutions. However, their willingness to conduct a search warrant on someone's life for a misdemeanor seems ridiculous. It is unreasonable for the FBI to conduct investigations involving misdemeanor violations at a federal level. It is not our role. Again, somebody walking through a building on J6, for example. Many of the agents' feedback focused on the Washington field office and its culture. WFO is a hopelessly broken office that's more concerned about wearing masks and recruiting preferred racial, sexual groups than catching actual bad guys. Amen to that. Amen to that. It's cool, Trump's getting it fixed and everybody's getting it fixed. I get it. But was William Barr and Christopher Wray, were they just given way too much autonomy to do what they did, which was to pollute the Justice Department? And it wasn't, don't forget that Barr had predecessors as well. So how did it get so woke? Obviously, we had the Biden administration, but it took 4 years to utterly destroy our federal law enforcement agencies, our federal legal apparatus at the DOJ? I guess so, and that should terrify you. Another whistleblower said, I wish you all would pay more attention to our safety than what types of masks we wear. If you are going to deploy us to a riot situation, then give us the proper damn safety equipment, helmet, face shield, protective clothing, and training. The after-action response is 50 pages in all. 50 pages of agents complaining were located by current FBI Director Kash Patel's team and recently turned over to the House Judiciary Committee and its special subcommittee investigating security failures and weaponization of law enforcement during the J6 riot. And I say riot, but you know what I mean. The protest, what should have been, that would have, I would argue, remained a mostly peaceful protest with no entry into the Capitol if it wasn't for the deep state's various agents, FBI included, but also other people who were there to instigate and promote and push the idea of we got to go into the Capitol. You all know who said that. 274 agents embedded in a riot with no safety plan. And I'm going to skip this part because it's obvious. Look, they're mad because they're in this situation, which, even if you're supposedly one of the good guys, there's a risk there that you might get pepper sprayed or whatever by Capitol Police or somebody else. Again, they couldn't identify themselves. They were ordered to not identify themselves even to local law enforcement. So they put themselves at risk for whatever reason. But we're going to skip that part. The next part is an agent says, our response to the Capitol riot reeks of political bias. This is the lead on this one. Frontline agents repeatedly raised issues of liberal bias and wokeness in their after-action assessment. The words politics or bias were mentioned more than a dozen times in responses, and similar sentiments scores of times in the 50 pages. One wrote, "Our response to the Capitol riot reeks of political bias." Another one said, "I wonder if our biases affected our preparedness." I would argue, of course, they did, but I wasn't there. A third suggested the agents and analysts had become engrossed in the main business of Washington, which is politics, rather than crime fighting, and blamed the Bureau's leadership for the slide. One said, "We have been used as pawns in a political war, and FBI leadership fell into the trap and has allowed it to happen. We're supposed to call balls and strikes regardless of political pressure. Now we can't even be trusted to be on the field." House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan vowed through a spokesperson to get to the bottom of the still untold secrets of January 6th, alongside of the January 6th Subcommittee Chairman Barry Loudermilk. Due to our oversight, this is according to Jordan's spokesman, due to our oversight, Chairman Loudermilk's leadership and Director Patel's leadership, we continue to discover what exactly happened on January 6th. And I would argue that it's as important, if not more important, to figure out what happened before January 6th. We need to get to the planning aspect of it. We need to know what Nancy Pelosi knew, or at least what she was told to do. Muriel Bowser, mayor of D.C. We need to know, because this wasn't just like, okay, well, there's a lot of people here. I got an idea. Let's go get agents, and let's go get these provocateurs, and let's go get Antifa. And No, this was planned. Okay? What happened on January 6th is one thing. Yeah, and obviously that's important. But what was the plan? And we can tell a lot about the plan itself if we find out what happened before, what politics, what deep state, what bureaucrats were involved in the planning of this J6 entrapment scam, and then what happened afterwards, the cover-up of all this stuff. They're parading around Capitol Police. And look, hey, since we're going down the road of some conspiracy theories, what about the mysterious deaths of certain people, including law enforcement personnel, law enforcement officers? There seem to be a lot of people dying afterwards. What did they know? Why were they silenced? Was it truly coincidental, or was there a conspiracy? These are questions that we need answered, because this was, again, January 6th was not a day. It was not an event. It was a conspiracy that started before the day and lasted for years after the day. It is still going on today. The cover-up of January 6th is still going on today. This is why, again, I think a lot of people are like, let's just move on. Let's move on from J6. Let's move on from the stolen 2020 election. Let's move on from Epstein. Let's move on. Everybody, I don't think anything makes me more annoyed. Nothing chaps my khakis quite as much as otherwise lucid patriots and conservatives and America First people that just like, you know what, let's just move forward, not look back. That's a huge mistake. I'll just tell you that up front. We do need to know what happened. We need to know it because it could happen again. I would argue that in certain scenarios, such as and including what we just read about, the wokeification of our law enforcement, just because President Trump's in there now and Kash Patel's in there and Pam Bondi's in there, just because that's the case today doesn't mean it's going to be the case in the future, in the near future. And we saw how quickly the FBI was turned from was previously a very corrupt organization to a corrupt and woke organization. They were woke on top of being corrupt. And even though I would argue that even to this day, no matter what, it will take, I would say, at least a decade to truly clean up the FBI. Okay? And who knows? Maybe we can do that. Maybe if J.D. Vance or whoever wins in 2028, Kash Patel's supposed to be there for 10 years, right? So we'll see. We'll see what could be done. But as of now, it's in progress or in process. But here's the thing. The FBI and the entirety of the DOJ was turned into a woke apparatus, a singularly woke apparatus in a very, very short period of time. What does that say about our institutions? What does that say about the steadfastness of those who are supposed to be the most steadfast in our government? The FBI should be should be the most consistent. Okay, they should be separate from everything else. Even in many ways, separate from the DOJ. They shouldn't be getting involved in DOJ politics, such as what we've seen with U.S. attorneys and all that stuff. Bad stuff there, guys. Bad stuff. Why is the why is the FBI getting involved in any of that? They should be isolated, quarantined in many ways. They should be able to operate the exact same way, regardless of who's president, who's the director of the FBI, who's the attorney general. There should be changes, little minor course corrections or slight changes in focus, but at the end of the day, go catch bad guys, and that's it. That's your job. Stop crimes that are being planned. Stop them from being able to happen, especially terrorism. And when crimes do take place that fall under federal jurisdiction, then fight them. And as a little side note, and also aid and assist local, city, and state law enforcement when they're needed, when they're called upon to do so. There's a lot of things they can do. But one of those things they shouldn't do is go woke or even be forced to go unwoke, right? I mean, I'm glad that they are going unwoke now, obviously. But why did it even come to that? Why do these changes have to be made? I've been a proponent of defunding the FBI, rebuilding a national law enforcement apparatus that is completely different, completely separate. Now, that's a pipe dream. That'll never happen. But hey, sometimes it is better to just tear it down and build it back up, or blow it up and build something new. I do feel the FBI is corrupt far beyond being able to be fixed again in any decent amount of time. But since that's not a very likely scenario, that means that we have to hope and pray and trust that we can get it fixed over an extended period of time with the right people in charge. And it goes back to elections, goes back to continuing to win these elections, win them even better. And then it comes to holding legislators accountable, right? Because they are supposed to be holding the FBI accountable. It's not just the FBI or the DOJ that is to blame. Where were our lawmakers? Why is Jim Jordan? I know he's been fighting it for a little while. Barry Loudermilk has been fighting it for a little while. But it shouldn't take reports from a news outlet, even one as great as Just the News. It shouldn't take reports like that or memos from Kash Patel. They should be all over this stuff. That's the whole idea of oversight. Let's take a quick break. Be right back. Talk about more crime. There's plenty of crime stuff going on. I love days where I get to talk about crime, because it is something of interest to me. Not crime itself, but stopping crime and hopefully bringing criminals to justice. I'm very hopeful that I've made it crystal clear over the months, over the years, that I am not a fan of pharmaceuticals. With that said, I do understand, I appreciate there are times when we need access to certain drugs. Maybe you have a chronic ailment and you haven't been able to find a natural solution to treat or even cure your ailment. What about antibiotics? Am I against antibiotics? No. Praise God, I haven't had to use any for a very long time. We were trying to figure it out. We were able to trace it back. I think it's 2011, the last time I had to take an antibiotic of any sort. So yeah, awesome. Praise God for that. There are those that like to use antibacterial. No, sorry. What are they called? Antiparasitics, right? Like ivermectin. And look, I got no problem with that. I actually would encourage those who want to take ivermectin for various reasons, do so. I'm more against big pharma's control over American lifestyles. That's what I'm really fully against. I'm not saying don't ever take medicines. Every single one of them is bad, right? I don't take many, but then again, I do have members of my family who do take them, on a daily basis. But what happens if you can't get the meds that you need? What happens if the supply chain breaks down, if there's war in Taiwan and we get involved and China cuts off our pharmaceutical ingredients? There are a lot of things that could happen. And that's why I am very, very blessed to be partnered with my good friends over at Jace Medical. You can go to patriot.tv/meds, patriot.tv/meds, and you can stock up on all kinds of pharmaceuticals. That way you're not beholden to big pharma, big government. I think I'm going to have to do more than one day, more than one show on this. I've done basically 2-3 stories, and I've already gone through half of my show time. So I'm going to have to speed it up. I've got about a dozen stories left, and obviously I'm not going to make it through all those. So let's just get going on them. One of the biggest reasons that we are experiencing so much crime across the nation today is because of the previous 4 years of open borders. The illegal alien invasion that we've been experiencing prior to the Trump administration taking over and putting an end to the invasion, at least. Now we're still faced with the tens of millions of illegal aliens that have flooded our streets, flooded our cities, flooded everywhere. And it's not just the illegal aliens themselves that are committing the crimes. There is a domino effect that happens when you flood a nation with so many people. You start seeing crime coming from even American citizens. The crime amongst Americans will increase as a result, just based upon, I mean, that's part of the system, right? I'll give you a sloppy example, but for example, illegal aliens come in, they take jobs. American citizens who had jobs before lose their jobs. Now they're getting desperate, and maybe they might turn to crime. Again, a sloppy example, but there are multiple reasons why. If we wanted to get into the sociological aspect of it and really break it down, I could show that to you, but not today. But when we go to talking about illegal aliens, some of the crimes are actually permitted by our laws. One perfect example is the ludicrous willingness of states like California and Gavin Newsom to allow illegal aliens to do certain jobs that definitely, absolutely, positively should not be getting done. Even if you want to be kind or whatever to illegal aliens, you should not put them behind the wheel of a killing machine such as a big rig. And we've seen what happens with that. It's made the news recently, and it made the news again, unfortunately, just very recently. According to Breitbart, DHS says that Biden-era illegal alien truck driver from India cripples a 5-year-old girl in California. Now, I'm not going to play the video. It is heinous. It is, my gosh. Really just pisses you off as well as makes you sad and just terrified for what happened. He drives up, rear-ends his car, and I thought, when I first saw the video, I thought there's zero chance that anybody could have survived that. Someone did survive, and obviously, and now she's crippled, according to the article. And there's a look on the screen. There's a picture of this illegal alien who was driving a big rig and demolished a vehicle. A Biden-era illegal alien from India was arrested after he smashed his 18-wheeler into a pileup and crippled a 5-year-old girl in California. The grieving father is now speaking out while President Donald Trump's deputies prepare to deport the migrant. The Indian national Partap Singh got a truck driving license after he was caught and released by Biden's deputies in 2024. The little girl, Delilah, can no longer walk, talk, eat orally, or attend kindergarten, as she had planned. 5 years old. That is what Gavin Newsom has delivered. That is what California Democrats have delivered, as well as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's lax policies, their open borders policies. Pisses me off. In the next post, September 25th, the Department of Homeland Security said that little Delilah Coleman's life has been forever changed by the accident, obviously. Delilah's father added that she was in a coma for 3 weeks and required 6 months of hospital treatment before her family could bring her home. While in the hospital, she had a craniectomy and was without half of her skull for 4 months. Holy cow. Delilah experienced a broken femur, skull. She was hurt very badly. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem says Delilah Coleman's life was forever changed when an illegal alien driving a 18-wheeler slammed into her and her family. Tragedy was entirely preventable. This is sadly another example of Gavin Newsom's California Department of Motor Vehicles issuing an illegal alien a commercial driver's license. How many more innocent people must become victims before Gavin Newsom stops playing games with American lives? DHS is working around the clock to remove dangerous aliens like Singh who have no right to be in the United States. The accused truck driver illegally crossed the southern border in October 2022 and was released right back into the country by the Biden-Harris regime. That little girl's life is not just changed. I couldn't imagine it. And it makes me so angry. So angry. As a resident of California, that nobody here is talking about it. It's not just the evil scumbags like Gavin Newsom or the wholly corrupt and irredeemable state legislature. It's the voters. Voters here in California, voters around me, they willfully ignore. They don't want to be wrong. They know they're wrong, okay? They do know they're wrong. Outside of the radical left, the most unhinged amongst the group, the ones that their only issue is whether or not they can have gay, trans, whatever, LGBTQIA plus parades, pride parades, and be dominant in whatever. Outside of those wackos, most in California understand, and that includes the Democrats. They know that this is screwed up. They know that this is wrong. They know that Gavin Newsom is awful. But they don't want to be wrong. That's it. I mean, that's what it comes down to. They cannot get around that. But I've hated Republicans for so long. I mean, it makes sense, but they got to be wrong because if Republicans and conservatives and patriots, if they're right, that means that these California voters who've been voting Democrat for however long, it means that they have to readjust their worldview. It's very different from other states. It really is. I've lived in many states, and I will say that the mentality here in California amongst Democrats it's so, I don't even know how to describe it. They do willfully stick their heads in the sand, and they just hope for the best because things have been okay. But I mean, with the economy here, with hideous laws and policies that allow for 5-year-old girls doing nothing to have their lives devastated forever by illegal aliens that Gavin Newsom empowered to drive an 18-wheeler. He should have been in India immediately after he was caught, but Biden let him out. He should have then been back in India when he got to California. But no, instead of hey, you're arrested and you're being deported, California says, hey, here's a commercial driver's license. You go get him, Tiger. I'm at a loss for words because stories like these just... And it really does. It really does come down to the Democrat mentality. Okay, it's not just the voters who willfully ignore the lunacy of their party. It is the fact that the party itself lives in lunacy. They live in denial. They gaslight, but they don't just gaslight their voters. They gaslight themselves. I truly believe that. I used to think that you know what, they're lying because they just want to toe the party line, or they're lying about this because they want to win elections, so they can't really. I always thought it was political, but I do believe now that a lot of them actually believe the stupid things that they say. They believe them wholeheartedly, and they live by those words, and it's helped them. It's helped them to get elected by other Democrats, right? So why stop it? Well, of course, the reason to stop it is because their policies suck. Their ideology sucks. And yet they keep going. And here's an example of that ideology that is clearly insane. This comes to us from townhall.com. State Rep Marcia Morey says no correlation. There's no correlation between crime and letting criminals out of jail. Look, just because somebody's in jail having committed crimes, and just because you let them out of jail and then they go commit more crimes, there's no correlation. You guys are manufacturing numbers, stop using that logic thing, okay? There's nothing logical about your feelings. Trust your feelings. Marcia Morey. A month ago, Ukrainian woman Irina Zarutska was viciously attacked on a Charlotte train. DeCarlos Brown Jr. stabbed Zarutska multiple times, including in her neck. She bled out and died from her injuries. Since then, the Democrat Party has refused to acknowledge the role their soft-on-crime policies played in Zarutska's murder. Brown had been arrested over a dozen times prior to murdering Zarutska, only to be released back into the community. Former North Carolina governor and current Senate candidate Roy Cooper blamed Republicans for cutting law enforcement funding. Oh no, it's your all's fault. As he believed we've all forgotten his party was the one behind defund the police. Yes, again, I truly believe. I used to think that they were just conning their voters. Now I believe that many of them, including Roy Cooper, they have gaslighted themselves so that they are more effective at gaslighting the voters. They have been hypnotized, brainwashed, self-indoctrinated, whatever it takes to make them say stupid things and stand by it as if there's some semblance of sanity in it. Representative Alma Adams said he can't stop crime. I said we can't stop crime by putting criminals in jail. They believe this stuff, folks. Charlotte Mayor Vi Lyles not only thanked the media that suppressed the video of the attack of Zarutska, but demanded compassion for Brown's mental health issues. The criminals are the victims in the eyes of these Democrats. The criminals are the ones that need to be protected. They're the ones that, oh my gosh, you don't know. You don't know what DeCarlos went through. You don't know what his life was like. Irina Zarutska escaped war in Ukraine. I would argue that, she came and tried to be a productive member of American society. She wasn't causing a ruckus. She wasn't getting arrested. She wasn't harming anybody. And she wasn't stabbing people on a train. DeCarlos Brown Jr. was, and he had a history of it, 14 prior arrests. And yet, Democrats, okay, you'll never hear the name Irina Zarutska leave this evil woman's mouth. You won't hear that name ever spoken. She will mention DeCarlos Brown. She will demand your sympathy for his plight. It was the system. It was the Republicans. It was Donald Trump that drove him to murder a woman in public. That's what it was. I am not one who likes to spread hate, but today's show, I'm not spreading hate, obviously, but I'm spreading valid emotional responses to this kind of crap. Anyway, we haven't even gotten to the story yet. Now, another Democrat in North Carolina is insisting that Zarutska's murder had nothing to do with Democrats letting career criminals out of prison despite multiple offenses. State Rep Marcia Morey told a crowd that there's no correlation between stopping murders and jailing criminals, because that couldn't possibly work. It hasn't worked before except throughout human history. If a criminal, and I'm going to say this slowly in case she's watching, if a criminal is incarcerated for their crimes, okay, stay with me. If a criminal is incarcerated for their crimes, the chances of them being able to then murder somebody on a train is greatly diminished. You can't tell me that locking up criminals and having them serve their appropriate sentences will not affect crime. Because if you say that, you are stupid. She said, don't correlate what happened in January and a magistrate who set bail according to guidelines to what happened in August. So to be clear, what happened in January? DeCarlos Brown Jr. was let go, let off on his own recognizance, told to sign a sign a promise. Oh, I will be back. I'm not going to go commit crimes. No, no, Your Honor. No, no, no. Sign that. Okay, fine. You're out. You're free to go. Great. Now, if a appropriate judge using appropriate common sense laws would have taken this lifetime criminal and incarcerated DeCarlos Brown Jr., when DeCarlos Brown Jr. was in jail, he would not have been able to murder Irina Zarutska. Had the judge done his job, had the laws done what they're supposed to do to protect the citizenry, have people like, I forgot her name now. What is it? Something stupid. I'm very mad at her. Marcia Moray. Had Marcia Moray been even, if her stances were somewhat lucid, then Irina Zarutska would be in jail. So for her to say that if, I mean, what she's saying is this, what she's trying to convince you of is this, that judge's actions in January had nothing to do with her murder. In other words, what she's saying is, if DeCarlos Brown Jr. had been kept in jail, as he was supposed to be kept in jail, then he still would have murdered Irina Zarutska from jail. She would have been murdered on that train while he was in jail because Marcia Moray is just, I mean, like the tiniest possible brain. You know, I'm surprised she's able to breathe. That's the crime part. Let's get to the punishment part. And apologies. I know this is a weird show, but yeah. Next one comes to us. I'm just going through. This is from the Epoch Times. Trump directs Attorney General to fully implement death penalty in Washington, D.C. And it's by Jacob Bird. I'm not going to read it because it's pretty self-explanatory, right? Death penalty, legal, allowable in D.C. Says, let's do it. Basically, any crime, what he's saying is, and I'll just sum it up for you, what President Trump said is, if it's a crime that allows the death penalty, go for the death penalty. That's it. It's pretty easy stuff. The bulk of today's show, which I think I've got, like 5 minutes left. This was supposed to be the big story. I was supposed to get through all the stories and then get to this one at the end. And this is going to have plenty of time to talk about it. So we'll probably talk about it more next week. I can't talk about it tomorrow because it's Friday, but next week we'll talk about it more. This is, obviously there have been massive crimes lately. Massive crimes. Started, if we take from Charlie Kirk's assassination and move forward, then we see that there continues to be radical leftist criminals committing extraordinarily dangerous acts. This has become a trend. This is a trend now, folks. Think about that. I mean, these things that used to be one-off events that would happen, every 3 months, maybe 6 months? Maybe, I can recall, especially when I was younger, there were years when things like this didn't happen at all. Whereas, 2 or 3 years later, we were still talking about, the DC snipers, right? We're seeing them happen 3 times in 2.5 weeks. It blows my mind. But the media is denying it. Democrats are denying it. And to be fair, most Republicans aren't really coming after it as hard. I mean, this is blatant. This is obvious. This is low-hanging fruit. If you're trying to make the United States of America, if you're trying to make the people understand what's happening, because we are asking for understanding, none of this makes sense to us, then this is the opportunity for them to start doing something, for them to start informing the public, because they know legacy media is not going to do it. So, and some are. So I don't want to encompass the entirety of all Republican lawmakers, but I would say most are not. Most are trying to change the subject. They don't like to talk about it because it's an uncomfortable topic. It really is. Not for me, probably not for you, but in the world of politics, there's a slippery slope from a political perspective, not from a reality perspective. In reality, it's crystal clear. All these crimes keep happening. Why? Tell us why you think so. But according to this article over at The Federalist, Brecken F. Theus wrote, while media denied leftist violence after Charlie Kirk's murder, 3 more left-wing attacks have happened. And there hasn't been, I'm shocked a little bit, maybe not shocked, I'm a little surprised that there hasn't been even more talk about this. There should have been a lot more talk. I mean, this has become a trend. It went from a hideous event to another hideous event, and then all of a sudden another one and another. Whoa, whoa, whoa! At this point, it's like, let's stop and assess it. Well, maybe that's what's going to happen. The subhead: media and left-wing politicians are not just complicit, they are active participants in the violence. They are the radicalizers of the left-wing terrorist movement, and I disagree. I think that they contribute, but the real radicalizers, that's happening in our schools, happening in especially universities, happening through media, happening through a lot of things. I'm not saying that Democrat politicians can be, that there's nothing there for them. What I am saying is this, that we can't just pin it on them. There are underlying societal forces at play. Okay. Another day, another act of left-wing violence, another media cover-up for their left-wing terrorist foot soldiers. In the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination, the corporate media put an enormous amount of effort into a psyop to make Americans believe the assassin was actually a Trump supporter, Jimmy Kimmel. While they did that, 3 more acts of left-wing violence took place. An attempted firebombing of a Fox News van. Firebombing of a van? A media van? Give me a break. That should be a huge news. I remember we had to go seek it out and because I remember when the news broke, and I'm trying to put up stories about it, and no, nothing. Very little was being covered. A shooting at an ABC affiliate after Jimmy Kimmel's well-deserved suspension. We all know about that. Now we know. Well, again, not very widely covered, especially once they found out that, oh my gosh, the guy's another radical leftist. Ooh, let's bury this story. And then most recently, an attack at an ICE facility in Dallas. There's been another couple since then. It's crazy. That is all just in a 2-week time frame and does not take into account school shootings, other attacks on ICE, assassinations, or assassination attempts and other instances of left-wing violence Americans have seen increase dramatically for the past several years. The media are running the same playbook for the ICE attack. They're saying on Wednesday, they said, which is apparently a left-winger, we now have very strong confirmation this is the case. Anti-ICE shooter tried to kill ICE agents, and the media is already churning to psyop people into believing this person was actually on the right. While no ICE agents were killed, 1 detainee was killed and 2 others were injured, according to the Department of Homeland Security. The fact has given the propaganda press a pretext for suggesting the shooter was actually trying to kill the detainees out of a hatred for illegal aliens. You can't make this stuff up, but they did. They are making it up. And they're feeding it to people. Do not underestimate the stupidity of our adversaries amongst the people. In other words, leftists who are sitting there watching MSNBC, reading New York Times, and more importantly, watching TikTok, getting their news from TikTok. Those people buy it. They're sitting there. They still think that Tyson Robinson was a MAGA guy because they haven't been told otherwise in their little bubbles. And now they're going to think, oh my gosh, did you hear about the guy that went to an ICE facility, but he shot the illegal aliens, not the ICE guys. He shot the illegal aliens. He was some MAGA guy who I guess he thinks that these are the lies that are being spread. And these people believe it. An analyst on CNN suggests that we don't know whether this was an anti-migrant shooting because of the victimology, who was struck, and whether this is an anti-ICE shooting. Really? Okay. Well, we do know, according to the Federal Bureau of Investigation Director Kash Patel, the bullet was inscribed with anti-ICE messaging. He said, these despicable, politically motivated attacks against law enforcement are not a one-off. We are only miles from Prairieland, Texas, where just 2 months ago, an individual ambushed a separate ICE facility targeting their officers. It has to end, and the FBI and our partners will lead these investigative efforts to see to it that those who target our law enforcement are pursued and brought to the fullest extent of justice. There's a lot more to the story, but I'm out of time. So, apologize for going so slow. If you're watching on my channel, I will bid you adieu. If you're watching on Patriot TV or the Gateway Pundit, then coming right up is the Shaftline Report with Mark Shaftline and Joe Visconti. I'm very, very excited to watch that, and I will pick up this. I'm not going to let this one go. We are going to pick up this story, everything about it. We're going to be talking about it very soon. But in the meantime, hang out, Watch Mark and Joe.